everyone, this is Kirti Mutatkar and I welcome you to the second year of This is Ag. I am super excited today because this episode, I'm starting the year 2023 with an episode which is slightly different than the rest of my episodes from 2022. I'm in conversation with Dr. Rosemary Ko. She is the Chief Medical Officer at UnitedAg. And through the conversation that Rosemary and I have, you get a sense of what the ethos of UnitedAg really is. So I am super excited to be starting the year with this episode. But before we start the episode, I also wanted to take a moment as we ended 2022 and starting 2023. I wanted to thank all of you for choosing to listen to This is Ag. It has been an extremely successful year. That's all because of all of you. So thank you so much for making This is Ag extremely successful. Happy New Year and looking forward to many more conversations in 2023. So I have today with me Dr. Rosemary Ko. She's a Chief Medical Officer at UnitedAg. And this is actually a slightly different podcast interview because I am not talking to one of our members, employer groups, but you're an employee at UnitedAg. So slightly different perspective. So I'm super excited with this interview, Rosemary. It's going to be very different.
Oh, thank you, Kirti. I can't wait.
Yep. So Rosemary, you have come into UnitedAg, that's been 3 years now, right?
Oh, I think close to 5.
5. And what got you what made you are in the medical field, you are a practicing physician. UnitedAg is a health plan, right? Sometimes health plan have a negative connotation attached to it from a physician standpoint. But why were you attracted to UnitedAg?
Yeah, so I was trained as a physician. I did my residency in internal medicine and preventive medicine, and I did my residency at Kaiser Permanente. And Kaiser is known for really excellent preventive care. They make sure you get all your screenings. And yet I felt like they weren't really fulfilling the potential of preventive care. And so I actually went to the startup world to work on health innovation, to develop new software to help people combat chronic disease, help them manage their lifestyle, really change their behaviors, and ultimately help them reverse their chronic diseases. After that, through that work, I actually met you, Kirti, through the Innovation Forum. And it really opened my eyes as to what a health plan could potentially do. Because working in health innovation, I always felt like health plans were part of the problem. All the cutting costs, managing, making sure that people didn't have access to care when they really needed it, adjudicating claims, making it really hard for people. That's what I thought health plans were. And I figured all health plans were the same.
Yeah.
Until I met you and all the questions that you were asking about how to improve member access to care, how do we really leverage the latest technology, how do we modify what's on the market to serve our population was really inspiring. So I thought, okay, this is something different here that I can get excited about, because when you have a partner in healthcare with a lot of purchasing power, like UnitedAg does, where you have a lot of control over what the member experience is like, and when you really care actually about the end user, the employee that we cover, the members, I think special things can happen. And so I wanted to be part of it.
That's true. And when you do that, right, it actually helps with the cost, because we sometimes, as a health plan, as different layers in healthcare, right, as we all know, and everybody is actually trying to see, how do I not pay this and how does somebody else pay this? So when you look at everything, right, network discounts and the whole everybody in the healthcare, but are we really spending the time to understand what is driving these costs, and should we really be spending our time thinking through that? So that's kind of what we're trying to do through UnitedAg.
Yeah, and I think that's what really surprised me about ag, actually. So, Kirti, I don't think I actually told you the story before, but shortly after I started working with the organization, I was at a conference and someone asked me, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I work for UnitedAg. We provide health benefits to the agricultural industry. And that person said, well, what does ag care about health? Like, do the workers even have health insurance? What are you even doing there? And I was shocked. I was like, this is this is horrible that people think a whole industry don't care about employees' health. And then I had to, try to correct the narrative in that one little N of one experiment there. And I had to educate that person. Well, the membership at UnitedAg is different. The employers really do care. The choice of UnitedAg as your health plan is really putting your hand up saying that I care about my employees. We're not the lowest cost plan. You don't come to UnitedAg when you want to nickel and dime people,
right,
and risk your employees' lives. That's not why you come to us.
Right.
And I had to educate this person that the members at UnitedAg care so much about their employees that they are so aware of the social determinants of health. It was another level that I hadn't seen before. I'd have a lot of my network is in the large employer space. And while they kind of understand the ins and outs of the challenges people have in their lives, they don't really dig down into the nitty gritty into the housing situation, what's happening in people's lives. And ag employers know the impact of the multicultural, the multi-generational families. They know the impact of the housing, that sometimes it is crowded. Sometimes you have, 3 generations in one household. They know the challenges of trying to eat well when there's one person in the family who cooks for the children and the spouses and for the elderly. And that is on a different level than most employers. And when there are issues that come up in their population, they come to us. I heard it all over the place.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, we heard all the time that, our employees are struggling with mental health right away. Like we knew, we got that feedback and we listened to it. And I don't think any other health plan has that type of relationship with their employers.
And also what you just touched on is employers don't have that relationship with the employees. Right? You find that in agriculture. Yeah. And the reason I continue to stay in agriculture and do what I do was exactly that. Because we see this, we talk to friends, family or whatever, right? The way employees are treated at different employer groups and the way agriculture actually treats employees. The perception out there is so wrong because it's at a very different level.
Oh, it's shocking. I remember in the beginning of COVID, we were right on the ball. We started educating our employer groups almost immediately about the pandemic. And whenever there was an outbreak, I got calls immediately. And at first, even I had that kind of bias. I was like, oh, I'm so worried about employers trying to shorten the quarantine time in case there's an outbreak, riding the edge of what is scientifically okay in controlling those outbreaks. But yet the response was very different. People were very conservative with their employee lives. They were like, okay, well, if the quarantine period is now from 10 to 5 days, I'm going to still keep that 10 just to make sure. Right. When the CDC shortened the quarantine time, our employers did not. They took the safety of their employees as the top priority, no matter what the business cost was. And that was incredibly inspiring.
And what you said earlier with the mental health, because I remember AJ Cisney from Rancho Guadalupe was our chairman at that time. And he reached out and he had some of his employees impacted by that and how passionate he was to provide that. And at UnitedAg, we actually did it at zero copay and nothing going to deductible. We said, let's just offer this for a year and see what happens. But that speaks volumes of the employee centric nature.
And, in ag, the employee-employer relationship is very different. The employer is actually part of the family of the employees. Think about like corporate America. If you're an employee of a large corporate company, you're not going to go to your HR when you have mental health issues. You're just not. You're going to be afraid. You're going to be worried about getting fired. But in ag, the employees tell their companies, they know that, at least with our employers, they know that their employer is on their side and wants to give them the best care possible.
And one of the reasons when this happens, I see when newer people or different people in different industries and TPA industries or other health plans kind of come into the UnitedAg fold. And I introduce you as the chief medical officer at UnitedAg. And it's a very different perspective because they're like, what does Rosemary do, right? Because they don't understand your role at UnitedAg is not the role that a typical CMO, a chief medical officer, would have in any other health plan. Your role is to say, how do I increase access to care? How do we provide the best care possible? And what kind of innovations can we bring in to address some of these chronic conditions and do that? So a very different role, right?
A very different role, a dream role, because I feel like I'm always on the right side.
Right.
I don't have to say no to anyone. I'm usually saying yes, and we can do that. Or, oh, that's a great idea. Let's try this. Or how can I help these up and coming companies design their solutions for ag for us so that maybe in a year or two, even if they're not the best fit for us now, they can grow into something that's a really good fit for us. So it's an incredible experience to really be like doggedly focused on how do we improve access, how do we improve the member experience, and then ultimately how do we turn around the health for an entire industry, really.
Right. So what do you were just saying something, and that made me think a little bit. Right now with chronic conditions or anything else out there is a ton and ton of startup companies, right? I mean, it's overwhelming sometimes to see.
Yes.
Like you take one we say, oh, let's control diabetes, right? And you have like 1,000 products. What, in your opinion, from your experience in the startup world and your experience, how do we go about testing that? What does that look like? And what should UnitedAg do? And what are we doing correct? I mean, what is right and what's wrong?
Yeah, I think so the startups, they often focus on their software and their technology. And there's this kind of notion that technology might solve all. If you get your algorithms right, you can personalize the experience. That will in turn cause behavior change and then health benefits. But when we think about social determinants of health, it's not algorithmic. Mm-hmm. Things happen to people and it's not predetermined. Sometimes you can predict them, sometimes you can't. And the most important thing when I look at solutions out there is how do you blend the technology with the human side? Mm-hmm. And for us, we luckily have a lot of human resources, meaning like we have a very good relationship with the health and wellness centers, and we integrate them into the care delivery system, and we have our lifestyle management program. And so we have humans on our end to be able to plug that gap. If there's a good technology company that doesn't have that humanistic approach, we can plug that gap. But it's curious to figure out how much of that human side do you need and how much of the technology side that you need. I would posit probably right now we need more of the human side, especially for our population.
Right.
For other populations that might not face the same social determinants of health, they can probably get by with like 90% tech, 10% human. But I think for us, it's probably majority human, and then tech supporting that.
I actually think, I know for our industry for sure, but any other industry, right? Because what COVID brought out was, yes, telemedicine and the technology kind of went to a different level, but it also brought out the importance of the human connectedness.
Yeah.
And that's going to come back more, I feel.
Yeah.
So what you said earlier, right? The technology helping augment what we do from a human side, I think that's going to be the best option going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And the human side is also not just one-to-one. It's actually one to your community and the people that you're around all the time too. And so how do you bring in more people than just that one member into the fold? How can you educate a whole community so that they can look out for each other? For instance, around risks around domestic violence, alcohol abuse. How do you get a community to think about their food sources differently? And I think, we have enough of that humanistic approach and focus on community to try to do that. We just need the good tech partners who are willing to build for our population.
Yeah, because that human connection is going to be important. And at UnitedAg, or maybe it's because we're smaller, or maybe because we serve one industry, we can do that well. I was earlier telling a story. I just took a tour of one of our California-grown floral operations, and I see how much of an impact the compliance expense has, the healthcare and all of that on the income statement. and a request came in and said, can we waive our late fees, right? Based on what, and I said, okay, but you can do that at UnitedAg. You can go one member at a time, understand what's really driving it and help that member, right? And that's a human approach. You're not lost in the whole kind of, you're not a number, right?
Absolutely. You're not a number, and you're also not just a human for today.
Yep. Yeah.
I think, UnitedAg has a very long-term view with our employers that we want to keep our employers for generations, right? Not just this year, not just the next 5 years, but decades.
Right.
And when you have that long-term view, weighing a fee doesn't make a difference.
Right.
It's a drop in the bucket, but what it does is solidify that relationship, and it creates loyalty. And that's how we need to think about healthcare. We often don't think about that like that in healthcare. We think about, oh, this employer is going to have this employee for, just the next 3 years. It doesn't matter if they have a heart attack then. So why should I bother investing in diabetes care now? And even health plans, a lot of other big health plans think like that too. Why pay for this kidney transplant now when we're not going to get the savings until 10 years down the road?
Right.
But UnitedAg is so different. It's like your view is so much longer than that.
Right. And it is hard because as humans, as when we going through financial issues and all that, we tend to be short-term thinkers because we are stressed. I mean, that's the anxiety. So even if we are human and the best person possible, sometimes that kind of creeps in, right? But then always kind of saying, okay, short term, maybe this saves us a few dollars, but long term, it's going to be a loss, right? So that I find my role as a CEO is over and over reinforcing that.
Yeah, and as a customer, who would you rather work with? Someone that only sees you as, $50 today? Or do you want to work with someone who sees you as basically a lifetime partner? I'm so grateful for our leadership and our board to support us in that. It's revolutionary thinking, and for people who think about business as just transactions, one employer in, one employer out, they don't have that long-term view. It is very hard for them to change their mindset to our mindset. And so we are just so lucky to have a board and leadership team that innately understands that and is aligned.
Yep. And like you said earlier, not all employers actually shouldn't even join UnitedAg or shouldn't, because it's not for everybody. It's like what we say from employees at UnitedAg. I always say this when I meet new employees. I said UnitedAg is not everybody's cup of tea, right? It's not like we're going to be okay with everything. You have to be a certain way to be a UnitedAg employee. Take it or leave it. Right. And the same thing with an employer group. There are certain employers are not the right people for UnitedAg. So we don't want anybody and everybody out there. We want the right people to be part of UnitedAg because we have a bigger goal and bigger strategy in what we're trying to do than just providing health insurance to agriculture, right? Success means something very different to us than just the growth and the financially being where we are with UnitedAg.
Yeah, I think that really highlights the aspect that our employers are not just customers, but they're really partners.
Correct.
Because they have to be okay with the experimentation. They have to be okay with us piloting certain things with maybe just part of their employees or maybe their group, but not another group. And that's challenging sometimes.
It is.
When you try to have, consistency in the benefits. But because our employers are open-minded and they do have that long-term view, they're open to that because they know ultimately it'll pay off.
So you've worked with us for 5 years, like you said, right? There was a different life out there for you. So do you ever kind of think back and say, maybe I could have been somewhere else? How does that thought ever cross your mind in the startup?
Oh, that's getting like existential.
You know what, Rosemary? What did you expect? You and I talking here.
No, this is really exciting. I don't really dwell on what could be or what should be. I really just do what I feel is right, and having impact is really important to me personally. And there are certain paths to having impact that are easier than others. when I was in the startup world developing solutions, the impact somehow feels more tangible. It's like, you're developing the solution, you're designing, you're testing it. That's all nice and great. But in healthcare, it's not the end user who makes a decision about whether or not your product succeeds. The decision makers are health plans, large employers, provider organizations, and government.
Right.
And therefore, in healthcare, there is a limit to making an impact just focusing on the solutions. You have to also partner with the buyers. And in my work with UnitedAg, I feel so fulfilled knowing that ultimately the work that we've put in and all the changes we've made will ultimately make people healthier.
So looking at, from your experience from outside of UnitedAg and looking at agriculture in UnitedAg, what do you think is the biggest challenge for us at UnitedAg?
We do have a lot of burden of chronic conditions, diabetes, hypertension. In the screenings that we have done, I've also detected quite a bit of excessive alcohol drinking.
Oh.
And all those conditions are born in lifestyle. And with lifestyle, you can't just tell someone to eat better. Like, that's not going to work if they don't have access. And so we actually talk a lot about the root causes. So whenever we present the results of the biometric screening to our employers, we talk about the causes. What's causing these unhealthy behaviors? Are the employees not sleeping, which we actually assess for in our biometric screening? A lot of times they're not. Do they potentially have obstructive sleep apnea and it's going undetected? We also screen for that. And, all the things that's happening in the employees' lives are reflected in these chronic conditions. So the chronic conditions in and of themselves are not the problem, they're the symptom. And so we really have to focus on the problem. And every time I have talked to an employer about, helping your employees feel less stressed, making sure their housing is okay, what is their access to food, and they are all willing to make changes. I've heard of employers taking away the soda at work. They are very passionate about making sure that their workplaces are as healthy and supportive as possible.
So what do you see as challenges? What are the challenges that we face?
Language is one challenge. And it's not just about translating something from English to Spanish, but it's also translating it into the culturally appropriate Spanish that they understand and that resonates with them. Connecting to the population that's at risk is incredibly important. And it can also be challenging, especially if there is a digital divide where they might have access to the latest technology. Many of them have smartphones, but do they feel like that's an avenue of trust? Can they use telemedicine and still feel trust and care from their provider? It is very different. Culturally, it's different. They prefer to see someone in person. And us being aware of those cultural nuances is incredibly important, and it's both a challenge and an opportunity.
So one of the things, Rosemary, you've not grown up in agriculture, right? So this is a very different podcast interview than my rest of my podcast interviews, because I usually am talking to people who've either grown up or part of agriculture for years and years. So what has your experience been coming into agriculture?
Yeah, so most of my adult life I've lived in large cities, New York City, San Francisco. I grew up in upstate New York, though, and I really did love going to the farms to pick apples or cherries and that kind of stuff, but that's the extent of my exposure to agriculture. And I think as a whole, the society in America has very little knowledge of what agriculture means. And it's because we're so disconnected from our food. I mean, if you go down the street and you ask 5 people, what does an artichoke plant look like? Probably none of them could tell you, right? Or what does an almond look like before it's shelled? They can't tell you. We're so disconnected from our food. We assume it's magic that it gets to our grocery stores or restaurants. And because we're so disconnected, that also means we have no concept of what agriculture is really like. And that's actually very dangerous because it opens our industry up to narratives that are heavily politicized, that really share only part of the story or potentially are completely untrue. And those assumptions I think actually fall into three basic buckets. The one that I see a lot is that people think most ag is bad, and the only good ag is really micro ag, like really tiny farms. So not even the small to medium agriculture, but like farmers markets, like my neighbor who is, growing oranges in their backyard or something. That's good ag. And everything else bigger. So if you have 2 lots of land, you're already bad.
You're a big bad.
Yeah. And then the second is, I think people think that ag is old and it's all low skill, but there's so much technology that goes into ag, and a lot of that technology is somehow demonized. Pesticides, GMOs are all demonized, right? But where's the other end of the story, where our chemical sciences, our ability to harness other organisms, whether that be, microorganisms or insects potentially, how do we harness our natural resources? All of that is like very sophisticated science that we don't hear about. And so ag is in this bucket of being low tech, low skill, and old. People think it's just about putting seeds into dirt, right? And that's really damaging, I think, as well. And then lastly, I was thinking about this. Ag is somehow has this connotation of exploitation that I think is really sad, because it's not what we experience at all at UnitedAg. But if you ask an outsider, ag exploits people, land, the environment, natural resources. It exploits everything around it. And that's really not true. From the farmers that we've talked about, they are very focused on preservation. It's their livelihood. For generations, their farm has been their livelihood. Why would they damage the thing that has given them money and fulfillment over the years? It doesn't make any sense. And so I think that the challenges are really people understanding what agriculture really is, past all of these negative narratives, will help, I think, them understand that ag is really a bright spot, not just for technology, but also for health. And that's what we're trying to do at UnitedAg.
That's so well said, Rosemary. That was awesome. What you said is just so true, because that was the reason I felt the need to start this podcast. This is ag, right? Because when you see people coming into agriculture, they're surprised. They're like, we need scientists, we need mechanical engineers, it's such a sophisticated industry that people outside of agriculture always have this, what? This is ag?
Exactly.
So that's where the birth of This is Ag happened. So you're so true. That's so true. Rosemary, thank you so much. This was really fun. It's always really fun to talk to you. I do that all the time when I'm feeling anxious or stressed, or I just want to run some idea by you. You have, just not in your role as a CMO, but just being part of the executive team at UnitedAg, you've done a lot, right? At UnitedAg, our innovation panels and our different products that we've introduced to UnitedAg. And even today, we are here today where you've come into the Women Ag Academy and you're leading a session. Do you want to talk a little bit about why that is important?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, unfortunately for women, this is still true, that women are pigeonholed into certain roles. From a very young age, we're told we should be a certain way. Usually that's quiet and cute, pretty, not speaking up, not speaking our minds. And in ag, in an industry that has historically been very male-dominated, the only way to elevate the whole industry as a whole, really, is to also elevate the women. Because if you have only half of your leaders being fully capable of achieving their potential, your industry is going to collapse. You need everyone to be able to reach their potential, to elevate the industry. And a lot of what we do in Women Ag and what we talk about is not about business practices or PowerPoints. It's really about how do you find your own superpowers and how do you leverage and manifest them in a way that achieves what you want to do in your life, in your career. And that's really exciting.
Right. So I'm looking forward to the session. I know you're starting with the meditation session. So I'm really, really looking forward to that session. And thank you so much, Rosemary. This has been fun.
Thank you, Kirti. It's always an honor to work with you and UnitedAg.